At the lavish Chandler family winter gala, Juliana Wyn, once dismissed and cast aside, stood quietly among the glittering lights and hollow pleasantries. No one knew that behind her calm presence was the powerful CEO who built the Alura empire from nothing. This is a story of redefining success, reclaiming honor, and transforming an entire system through resilience, brilliance, and grace. Juliana Wyn grew up in the grand estate of the Chandler family, a place that gleamed with perfection on the outside but was cold and hollow within. To outsiders, she was the Chandler granddaughter, a name that drew nods of respect. But inside those gilded walls, Juliana was nothing more than a shadow, the mistake, the child of a marriage deemed unworthy. Her mother, a woman of humble background with no wealth or prestige, had quietly left after being rejected by the Chandlers, leaving Juliana to survive in a world of luxury that offered her everything but love. From a young age, Juliana was different. While her cousins busied themselves with etiquette lessons, garden parties, and inheritance strategies, Juliana was sketching designs, writing notes, and dreaming of a future that didn't require anyone's permission. She imagined building a tech empire that would empower women to think freely, lead boldly, and live fully. But in the eyes of the Chandler family, such ideas were nothing short of laughable. "Juliana, stop dreaming. You weren't born to lead," Aunt Eleanor once said with a condescending smirk after catching 12-year-old Juliana scribbling her first business plan. That plan, rough and messy, but filled with ambition, was torn in half and tossed into the trash right in front of her. No one in the Chandler household believed Juliana would amount to anything. To them, she was tainted, half blood, half status, half worth. She wasn't granted admission to the elite boarding schools her cousins attended. Instead, she was sent to a public school, a quiet exile designed to sever the family's hopes, and perhaps ties, with her. Still, Juliana never stopped dreaming. She hid startup books under her pillow, taught herself to code late at night, and worked at a local cafe to save up for her first used laptop. She became best friends with library aisles, worn-out textbooks, and wild ideas the world wasn't ready for. But what hurt most wasn't the lack of luxury or opportunity. It was the way her own family dismissed her very existence. At every family dinner, Juliana sat silently while relatives bragged about Ivy League acceptances or internships at elite firms. When she nervously mentioned winning a regional coding competition, the room went quiet, followed by tight-lipped smiles, awkward coughs, and the clinking of silverware. Her accomplishments didn't matter. "Not here. You want to be a CEO? That's adorable." Those words, delivered with casual cruelty by her cousin Ben, who once failed at running a family company himself, burned deep. Juliana never spoke about her dreams again. Not out loud. She chose silence, not as surrender, but as preparation. Quietly, she started planning a future that wouldn't need their approval. Juliana learned to hide her emotions. She failed quietly, got back up in the dark, and kept pushing. She read biographies of successful women, studied how they endured rejection and broke through barriers. She built resilience through loneliness, and faith through small, unnoticed victories. At 17, she created the first prototype for an internal communication app, the product that would eventually launch her future company. Alura, no funding, no backing, just raw determination and belief in her own vision. And then came her quiet exit, on the night of a grand 21st birthday gala for another Chandler heir. Juliana packed her things and left. No farewell, no drama, just a clean break. She moved into a cramped studio apartment where dinner was often instant noodles and nights were spent coding until sunrise. She had lost everything the family once gave her, but in that moment, she began to gain everything she would ever need. When Juliana left the Chandler mansion, she had nothing but a worn-out backpack, a glitchy old laptop, and an unshakable belief that she wasn't born to be someone else's background character. She moved into a small rental room in an industrial neighborhood on the city's edge. By day, the streets buzzed with diesel trucks and welding sparks. By night, the air was filled with barking dogs and the clatter of late-night factories. The air conditioner in her room was more decorative than functional. It screeched like a wounded animal and died out completely during the hottest nights. Every morning, the smell of motor oil from the mechanic shop below seeped up through the vents, mixing with dust and dampness. She had to cover her nose with a wet towel just to focus. But Juliana didn't complain. In fact, she felt more alive than ever. She worked days as a waitress at a local cafe to make ends meet. At night, she propped her feet on a broken chair and dove into coding. Fingers stiff from the cold. The lines of code she typed through the night, sometimes under a leaky roof with rain dripping into a pot on her desk, were the first bricks in what would later become the Alura empire. Just survive today, she'd whisper to herself, and tomorrow will be different. Her idea was simple, an app that helped teams communicate more clearly, cut through the noise, and work with more connection and empathy. She named it Alura, a word she invented to sound sleek, fresh, and professional, but execution was a battle. She had no capital, no partner, no mentor. She sent out hundreds of emails to investors and tech communities, receiving mostly silence. The few replies she did get were dismissive at best, patronizing at worst. One investor smirked, "You don't even look 25. Who's going to trust a nobody girl building tech?" Once, after saving up for weeks, she rented a tiny corner in a shared workspace, but even that place had a broken air conditioner. Every afternoon, the heat in Saigon felt like it was melting her skin. Sweat dripped down her back and onto her keyboard. Still, she typed through it. The rejections stuck with her. One investor sized her up and said, "You should try marketing instead." Another time, she was invited to present her idea at a startup showcase. The mic didn't work, her slides glitched, and people started talking over her. She almost walked off stage. But she stood tall, adjusted her breath, and said loudly, "Even if none of you can hear me, I'll still tell Alura's story. Because if even one person listens, it's worth it." No one invested that day. But afterward, a first-year college girl came up to her with tears in her eyes and said, "You gave me hope. I want to start something too." That one sentence fueled Juliana for months. She started freelancing to keep Alura alive, building websites, writing technical manuals, tutoring coding online. She worked until 2 or 3 a.m. almost every night. Cold rice, instant noodles, and cheap coffee became her closest allies. Some months, she had to choose between paying the electricity bill or renewing Alura's domain name. And more than once, she sat coding in the dark, laptop plugged into a backup battery, surrounded by the buzz of night insects. Little by little, the product took shape. A small company agreed to pilot Alura with their team. They loved it. That was her first customer. From there, updates came from real-world feedback. No big PR, no hype, just a product that worked and solved real problems. Even when she wanted to quit, her faith anchored her. Every morning, she prayed quietly, "God, if I'm on the right path, give me strength. If I'm lost, show me a new way." And almost like clockwork, whenever she was on the edge of giving up, she'd get a thank you message from a user, an unexpected email inquiry, or a surprising opportunity. 3 years after leaving the Chandler household, Alura officially launched with 6 employees. The first office was still modest, a rented room with mismatched chairs and flickering lights, but to Juliana, it was a castle, a sanctuary for a dream that was once laughed at. No one knew that for over 2 years after launching Alura, Juliana didn't pay herself a single dollar. Every bit of the modest revenue was reinvested into the platform, improving the system, training staff, and keeping the 12-person team afloat through the most uncertain days. There were no headlines, no angel investors throwing in millions, just quiet steps, sharp as the resolve of someone who had once been pushed out of the game. Juliana didn't fight with anger, she fought with strategy. While competitors focused on rapid scaling, she chose a different path, going deep on quality. She listened to every piece of feedback, rewrote lines of code herself, and developed an internal system capable of reading a company's culture not just through data points, but through behavioral nuance. That became Alura's secret edge. Then, small victories began to surface. A local hotel chain saw a 38% drop in employee turnover within 6 months of using Alura. A large tech firm reported a 21% boost in productivity after restructuring based on Alura's analysis. Juliana never broadcast these wins. She simply nodded, took notes, and quietly made the system better. Every move had purpose. She once told her team, "We don't need to be the fastest. We need to be the most accurate. Because by the time the world looks our way, we won't be a startup, we'll be a solution." At month 30, Alura unexpectedly made it into the top 5 HR tech platforms in the region. According to an independent ranking, it wasn't because of slick marketing, but because of real metrics. 97% client satisfaction and 91% client retention into year 2. This was when Juliana began to approach major corporations, one of which bore a familiar name, Chandler Holdings. When the initial email was sent to Chandler, Juliana didn't use her personal address. The outreach came through her strategy team, following the same protocols as with any other prospect: deep research, identifying pain points, and crafting a roadmap. Everything was professional, deliberate, and effective. It wasn't until the final presentation meeting, when Chandler's top executives walked into the room, that they realized who was behind Alura. "Good afternoon," Juliana said calmly, her voice steady and clear. "I'm the founder and CEO of Alura." A brief silence fell over the room. Elaine Chandler, her former mother-in-law, sat quietly, her eyes scanning the face she had once dismissed as unworthy of the Chandler name. But this time, her gaze carried something else, a quiet, speechless respect. Juliana said nothing about the past. Instead, she opened a comprehensive analysis of Chandler's internal operations, departmental overlap leading to inefficiency, a sharp rise in mid-level managerial resignations, innovation stagnation across product teams. She then presented a cultural transformation roadmap for the next 18 months, 3 phases, 9 strategic goals, and 27 specific metrics for measurement. "We don't just offer software," she concluded. "We help you re-engineer how people belong in your company, not through slogans, but through real data and real commitment." The meeting ended without a single mention of personal history. As Juliana walked out, one board member whispered, "We lost a gem once. Thank God we still have a chance to make it right." 3 months later, Chandler Holdings officially signed on as one of Alura's largest and most influential clients. But Juliana didn't celebrate with a party. She sat by her office window, watching the rain, sipping green tea, and wrote in her journal, not for revenge, but to prove that real worth doesn't stay buried forever. Her greatest win wasn't the contract. It was the fact that she had won with grace, with belief in kindness, and with meticulous, steady decisions, not out of anger, but out of purpose. No spotlight, no vengeance, just a clear path walked with patience and strength. And when the world finally turned to look, she was already ready. 3 years after walking away from the Chandler mansion, Juliana Wyn stepped onto the main stage of Southeast Asia's largest tech event. Her smile was soft, her eyes calm, not because of the spotlight, but because she knew deep inside, she had finally arrived. The auditorium was packed, industry leaders, startups, dreamers hungry for inspiration. Everyone was talking about Alura, a simple yet breakthrough platform already used by over 500 companies to strengthen teams and build healthier work cultures. But only Juliana truly understood the price she had paid for this moment. As the host read her name and introduced her as the youngest CEO among Asia's top 30 most influential founders, Juliana didn't feel triumphant. She felt still. For a brief second, the applause faded into silence. She remembered the cramped apartment, the smell of motor oil, the nights crying over broken code in the dark, and she quietly whispered in her heart, "Thank you, God, for not letting me quit." That ceremony wasn't a pinnacle of glory, it was the beginning of something far more meaningful. After Juliana's short, heartfelt speech, the media started chasing her story, not because she was the ex-daughter-in-law of the Chandlers, but because she had quietly risen above and built a company that people described as equal parts heart and brilliance. Ironically, the Chandler Corporation, once managed by her former in-laws, was now in crisis. Departments disconnected, leadership clashing, and a workplace culture that had turned cold and calculating. In an emergency meeting, the head of HR suggested, "Maybe we should try using Alura to restore our internal morale." At first, the CEO hesitated, but after hearing positive feedback from other partners, they decided to reach out. Juliana read the collaboration request from Chandler Corp on a quiet rainy night while staying late at the office. No one saw her hands tremble slightly or the redness in her eyes. It wasn't hatred, it was the surreal weight of full-circle grace. "Should we work with them?" her assistant asked. Juliana nodded slowly. "We didn't build Alura for revenge. We built it to heal." When Juliana walked into the Chandler boardroom weeks later, she didn't arrive in a luxury car or flaunt designer clothes. She wore a simple white blouse, black trousers, her hair neatly tied back, calm eyes, a gentle presence. When Mrs. Chandler, who had once mocked and expelled her, saw her, She froze. Juliana? She stammered. Yes, I'm the founder of Alura. Juliana answered quietly. There was no blame, no sarcasm, just the steady presence of a woman who no longer needed to prove anything, because her value had already spoken loud and clear. The contract signing went smoothly. No press, no cameras, just one extended hand between people who once stood on opposite sides. When Mrs. Chandler shook Juliana's hand, hers trembled slightly. For the first time, she looked Juliana in the eye, not as an unworthy daughter-in-law, but as a true leader. Afterward, Juliana quietly left. She didn't post about it, didn't tell anyone from her old life. But on her way home, stopped at a red light. She saw a little girl selling lottery tickets, hiding from the rain under a small awning. The girl clutched her stack of tickets tightly, eyes full of silent dreams, so much like Juliana's own eyes. Years ago, without thinking, Juliana stepped out, handed the girl a raincoat, and gently asked, "Do you have a dream? If you do, don't let it go. Someone out there will need it someday." Juliana didn't need an apology, didn't need applause, because the greatest recognition wasn't money, fame, or power. It was knowing she hadn't lost her heart along the way. They once cast her out of a family, but she never lost herself. And that was the truest victory of all. There was no applause, no emotional speech or prestigious award handed to Juliana on the day Chandler Holdings signed the strategic partnership deal. But to her, none of that mattered, because she knew, true success isn't found in the spotlight. Success, for Juliana, was a message from a former employee that read, "Thanks to Alura, I found meaning in my work again." It was realizing that a young female entrepreneur in the Philippines was using her platform to transform her family business. It was waking up every morning knowing she had built something that not only served customers, but also empowered those who, like her once, were dismissed and overlooked. Throughout her journey, what she was most proud of wasn't revenge. She never needed to get even. Instead, she chose to lift others up, not just through her product, but through her very existence as living proof that a woman who was once broken, who once hit rock bottom, can rise, strong, kind, and successful, without becoming bitter or losing herself in the process. Juliana didn't build Alura to become a CEO. She built it to answer a question that had haunted her. Is it true that when a woman falls, her chances are gone forever? Her life, her company, her resilience, all speak one loud, defiant answer. No, there's always a chance. If you dare to begin again, even if you're starting from below zero. Today, as she stands before a global summit on leadership and innovation, she smiles and shares, "I'm not here to tell a success story. I'm here to remind you, never extinguish someone's dream. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person who believes, for a fire that seemed dead to burn again." And perhaps, for Juliana, the greatest success isn't in numbers or business deals. It's in that moment, somewhere out there, when a woman sitting silently in the middle of her ruins suddenly lifts her head and whispers to herself, "Maybe I can dream again." If you've ever been underestimated, Juliana's story is a reminder that quiet perseverance can make the loudest impact. Subscribe to the channel to keep following inspiring journeys like this one. Let me know if you'd like a more dramatic, cinematic, or emotional tone for voiceover or subtitles.